Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to show you how to make a high performance longbow. If you've never made a bow before, this is the place that I would recommend that you start. And if you have made self bows before and you want to get into laminated bows, this is the place I would recommend you to start as well. And the really cool thing about this kind of bow is you only need 3 materials. The first thing is a good piece of wood. Secondly, you'll need drywall tape. And the third thing you really need to get is some wood glue. I prefer this Titebond 3 wood glue because it's waterproof. And this is all of the materials we're gonna need to make an awesome, really fast bow. And as far as tools go, you can go really minimal or use power tools. It doesn't really matter because we're not removing a ton of wood. I will say, if you use power tools, it's a lot easier to mess up the bow, so just be careful and take it as slow as possible. These 3 materials are really cheap and accessible. I think I got it all for under $15. But I did find out that the wood glue and the drywall tape is a lot cheaper on Amazon, so I'm gonna leave some links below so that it'll be convenient for you to find them. Let's talk about the kind of wood that you're gonna wanna get to make a good, solid bow. The first thing you need to know is that you don't need to source it from any special place. You could just go to the hardware store and pick up a piece of wood. And there are many different kinds of wood that will make a bow. Some will make better bows, some will make worse bows. The first thing you wanna look at is the hardness of the wood. If the wood is so soft that you can put your fingernail into the wood, it's too soft to make a bow. You're gonna want a harder kind of wood than that. The second most important thing is the way the grain runs. You want the grain to run the entire length of the bow stave or the piece of wood you're picking out. You don't want the grain to be running off the side of the wood anywhere. If it runs off the side of the wood, that can create a weak spot where the bow can break. But you want it to go directly straight down on the top of the board and then also on the side of the board. There are many woods you can use from a hardware store. Red oak can work good, maple can work good. I'm gonna try poplar today. It's a hardwood, it's really cheap wood, and I think it's gonna make us a really good bow. Most boards at a lumber store are kiln dried, and what this means is that the drying process is sped up by basically putting it in an oven or a dehumidifier. And what this does is it sucks the moisture out of the wood really fast. This process is a great production way to dry wood so that you can have lumber to build a house or do construction, because you don't want that wood shrinking after you put your flooring down. But the problem with this with bows is that it dries the wood so fast it can make the wood brittle, because with a bow we need it good under compression and tension because we're bending the bow. It's not gonna be a static piece. When we're bending this bow, the back of the bow is under tension and the belly's under compression. So that brittleness can be really bad, and that's exactly why we're gonna add a bow backing to the back of this bow. Now there are multiple bow backings you can use, and I have a video on 10 bow backings that actually work. But today we're gonna use my favorite bow backing, which is this Fiberglass drywall tape. It's really easy to use, it's extremely cheap, and it's so durable, you really just cannot beat it. Before we go ahead and put the bow backing on the bow, what we need to do is to lay the bow out and get it to the rough shape we want. And if you want to follow along with this, I've got a free PDF download for you guys that shows you all the dimensions, and it's something that you might want to print out or save onto your phone so that when you are building the bow, you can reference it to know where to lay out the handle and remember all the little things that is easy to forget when making your first bow. Let's get right into the layout of this bow. As you start to lay out your bow on the piece of wood, you want to look for defects to try to avoid those. And one end of the piece of wood I have has a split in it, and so that's the side I'm gonna cut off. I want a 64-inch bow. This whole bow is 6 feet long, so 72 inches. So I'm gonna cut off the side that has the split in it so we can avoid that. And we'll use that extra side we cut off to beef up the handle section. The first thing you wanna do is find the very center of the bow, which in my case is gonna be 32 inches for a 64-inch bow. Now that we found the center, we can lay out the handle section. And where we want the center of the bow is where the most pressure is on your grip. So on a finished bow like this, right here where the most pressure is where the center of the bow needs to be. And that's gonna lay 1.25 inches below the arrow rest. So we already found the center of the bow, which is right here, so we need to measure up 1.25 inches to mark the arrow rest. So now we marked out the center of the bow, and then we went 1.25 inches to the arrow rest. Now we're gonna mark down 2 3/4 inches, and that'll give us a 4-inch handle section. Now we've got our 4-inch handle section. From there we need to create our fade outs. So we're gonna do 2-inch fade outs on either side. This should create a total of an 8-inch handle, which is exactly the same size of our scrap piece. So we can glue that on to make a thicker handle section. Okay, so we've got our 2-inch fade outs, center of the bow, and a 4-inch handle. As far as the limbs go, we're gonna keep it a very simple design. our limbs come out to 27 inches. So we're gonna find the half point of 27, which should be what, 13 and a half. So that's gonna be the midpoint of our limb. So we're gonna keep that 1.5 inch wide limb, but when we get to the half point, we're gonna make this skinnier and taper it down to 3/4 inch limb. That's gonna make the limb tips a lot thinner, which will make our bow a lot faster. So we're gonna find the center of here, which should be 3/4, and then half of 3/4 is 3/8. So take it 3/8 on either side of the center. From here, I'm gonna use a straight edge to mark my lines. If you did this bow layout correctly, your top limb will be longer than your bottom limb. The reason that is because we have all this extra handle section on the bottom. Because your arrow rest is just gonna be right up here, so your top limb's gonna be 1.5 inches longer, and that's completely okay. We'll need the top end to bend a little more than the bottom end in the end to get a smooth shot. I need to interrupt real quick to let you guys know that we now have a website. And on that website, we're not selling t-shirts, but we're selling bowstrings, something that can benefit me and that can benefit you at the same time. So if you want to support this channel, head over to KramerAmmons.com or click the link below to go pick up your bowstring. They are Flemish twist bowstrings. I make them out of Dacron string, and I also have a hybrid bowstring if you want something with a little more speed and a little more I've got 3 bowstrings up for sale. I'll custom make the length, and the whole website is 40% off. So if you need a bowstring or a tillering string, head over to KramerAmmons.com, pick up yourself a bowstring. I would appreciate it, and I know you guys would like it too. Oh, and if you already have a bowstring, that's completely okay. Go ahead, go over to KramerAmmons.com, buy a bowstring. That way the one you have now can become your backup, and you can have a new main string. Come on. All right, now back to the bow build. Layouts sometimes can be difficult to understand, so I'm gonna walk you through it one more time. We first found the center of the bow, and then from there, we went up 1.25 inches. That's where our arrow rest will be. And then we came down from that point 4 inches, which is going to be our whole handle section. So it's 1.25 inches up, or if you're gonna measure from the center line, that's gonna be 2 3/4 down. Either way, you've got a 4-inch section. From there, we have the fade outs. 2-inch fade out and another 2-inch fade out. Then go down the limb, halfway down the limb, you're gonna make a mark, and then from there, you're gonna fade all the way down to 3/4 inch. It's gonna be the same thing on this other side. All the way down, halfway on the limb, fade out to 3/4 inch. If you want all of these measurements, again, they'll be in the free PDF download for you guys. At this point, we're gonna glue up this scrap piece of wood to the back of the bow. This will give us a much thicker handle section to work with and keep the handle from bending. These 2 pieces of wood are extremely flat, and so I don't need to sand them down or smooth them out anymore. But what I will do is I'm gonna grab a hacksaw blade and rough up these 2 surfaces so that I can have more gluing surface. I wanna give myself every opportunity that these 2 pieces of wood don't separate. Oh man, that's so brittle. When you have really dry wood like this, a sizing coat is important. All a sizing coat is just putting some glue down and letting it soak into the dry wood. If all you do is put a quick layer of glue down and clamp it down, a lot of that wood's gonna soak into the wood. So go ahead and put a sizing coat down, let it sit there for 5 minutes, and that'll become tacky. Once that glue becomes tacky, then go ahead and put 1 more layer of glue on both sides of the wood and then clamp it down. I found that this helps, especially when you're using dry wood, to keep the laminations held together over a long period of time. All right, it's tacky, so we're gonna go ahead and give it another coat of glue and then clamp this together. A cool thing about this Titebond glue is that it sets up in 30 minutes. I think I'm gonna leave it a little longer, but I'll leave it for about an hour with the clamps on it, and then I can go ahead and put the bow backing on in the same day. Then all I have to do is wait 24 hours to finish out the bow. You don't have to do it in different steps, like glue up the handle, wait a couple days, and then glue up the back of the bow. It says to not stress it for 24 hours, which we won't do. They'll have a tight enough adhesion that we can take the clamps off so we can put the bow backing on. With a glue up like this, your clamps don't have to be extremely tight. If you don't have clamps, you could wrap it and duct tape real tight, or you could just set a brick on it or something like that, and that should work out fine. These factory cut boards are actually really straight, and so all you need is a little bit of clamping pressure and it should hold for you. Also, if you clean up the glue while it's wet, it'll make it a lot easier. We're gonna go ahead and let this dry, and then we'll get onto the bow backing. Okay, I've got everything ready to glue up, and I put some wax paper down, and then I laid out the fiberglass strips. These are really easy to lay out. You just wanna unravel this, make it the length of your bow. you want 6 strips, and then you want to make 3 bundles of 2. So you end up with 3 bundles, but there's 2 in each bundle. It goes a lot faster that way instead of applying 6 individual strips. I'm gonna go ahead and do another sizing coat like we did before on the handle. I decided not to shave down the bow profile. Since it's such a flat board, we'll be able to put the fiberglass tape on without clamping it, just laying it completely flat, which is a thumbs up, to not have to do like an ace wrap around it or something like that, because then it gets just so much more messy. But if I can keep it flat like this without rounding the corners, I can just lay out the fiberglass tape and it'll make it a lot cleaner and a lot easier to do, and we'll just trim down the profile of the bow later. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a sizing coat like I did on the handle, just a real thin layer of glue, let that get tacky, and then we'll apply the fiberglass. All right, time for the first coat. We're real good and sticky. It soaked up a lot of the glue. I'd rather go over with the glue than under. And from there, get your first bundle of the fiberglass tape. Extremely easy. Just lay it on. You want to make sure there's no wrinkles in it or anything like that. As you're rubbing the fiberglass tape in, the goal is to get all the little divots out. So if you see little holes inside of the fiberglass tape where there's no glue, put more glue on it, rub it in with your finger, and then at that point, when every single divot is filled, add the next layer of tape. All right, it looks like down here we're in really good shape. The fiberglass tape went on nice and smooth. That wood is so flat, it just laid flat on there, looked really good, and I was able to get every single crevice out of that fiberglass tape by putting more glue in there and smoothing it all out. Got all the wrinkles out, and I think this is gonna make a really good bow, and I'm so excited for it, but we have to wait until it dries 24 hours before we can stress it, so I'll see you guys tomorrow. Welcome back to a new day. We gave this bow plenty of time to dry. There's a couple dark spots on it, and that's just because I put too much glue in that area, and that's completely fine. What we need to do next is to get this bow to its rough shape. So let's get right to it. We started taking the limb tips down and took off the excess fiberglass. So now that the profile is more or less close to what we're gonna have when we're finished, it's gonna be a little skinnier because we're gonna clean it up. But on the belly of the bow, we wanna take off enough wood to where we can bend it with our hands on the ground. This is a process called floor tillering, and it's not bending it very much, but you just wanna make sure your bend is even on both limbs. Then we can move on to the tillering process. So right now it's just hogging away a lot of excess wood on the belly, a little bit on the handle, and then after that we'll really be able to get into the fun stuff. Common easy mistake to make is to take one side down further than the other. So the solution to that is to draw an even line down the whole length of the limb on both sides. Then when you're taking your wood down, you just take it down to the line and you know you'll be equal on each side. But you want to check both sides very often because it's not good to take one side down really far, leave the other side high. Even though poplar is a hardwood, the wood is very soft. I'd say it's just a little bit harder than pine is. So what that means is that this wood is super easy to work with, but it's not gonna produce the fastest shooting bow that you can make. We've got the bow shaped out and we've got it floor tillered. The handle section actually turned out really good as well. You can hardly even see the transition in between our glue ups. So everything's looking really good. So now it's time to start thinking about putting a string on it. And in order to put a string on the bow, we need to get the nocks cut. So we're gonna jump in and cut the nocks right now. Everybody probably has their own way of cutting nocks, but this is how I like to do it. I'll come down about 3/4 of an inch and I'll make a mark. Now we've got the back of the bow here, the belly of the bow on this side. So the handle's gonna be on this side. You always want it angling toward the handle. I've made a bow going the wrong way when I was first starting out. So always start on the back of your bow and angle towards the handle. Some people eyeball this, some people prefer to use a square. What we want is a 45-degree angle. From the back of the bow to the belly of the bow. And then from there, I'll just come forward just a little bit. Give myself another line. So right in between those two lines is where I'm gonna cut the groove. I'll match this on the opposite side. What I use to cut is a chainsaw file. I find these to be really easy. They can get clogged, but it's the perfect thickness of a bowstring. Start off slow to get it going. You want to cut the knot to the width of a bowstring. So there's a little bump there on the bowstring, so that's not deep enough yet. That looks perfect. Now it's just a matter of repeating this knock on the other side. The most important thing when you're cutting your knocks in is that you need them to be even with each other. Because if one, let's say I did my other knock loop way down there for an example, I've got one knock loop here, one knock loop way down there. What's gonna happen is it's not gonna pull evenly the limb, and it'll cause this limb to twist kind of this way. And so you don't want that limb twist in your bow. So it's not necessarily important how far up your knocking point is, but it's very vital that your knocking points are lined up together. This fiberglass tape has that grid pattern, so you can just follow that over instead of squaring. Before you cut the second knock in, make sure you look across to see if they're lined up. We're looking good. Okay, so we're at my favorite part of the bow making process. We've got technically a board right now, or a stave, and since we're starting to get a string on it, this is the process of turning it into an actual bow. This process is called tillering, and all tillering is taking off wood on the belly of the bow to make the limbs bend evenly. So we're turning a board into a bow right now. That's why I like this so much, because it gets so exciting and nerve-wracking as you start to bend the bow. There's a couple tips or techniques that'll help you if this is your first time tillering. First thing you need to know is that you don't necessarily need any special tools to tiller. You can do most of it by floor tillering, and then once you get a string on it, draw the bow back in a mirror and you can look to see if the limbs are bending evenly. It does help though to have some tools like a tillering tree. It just has a notch in the top of the board and then notches throughout, so you can draw your bow down and you can step back and look at the bend. The only negative to this is that you don't want to leave the bow bending a heavy distance down for a long period of time. That's just gonna give the bow undue stress. And if you want what I think is the best way, you can use a tillering board. And I'm gonna make one of those here soon, but basically it's the same thing as a tillering tree, except you have some pulleys and a longer rope attached to it so you can stand back and pull the bow down and just watch it as it bends. It's much better for exercising the limbs, and it gives you a better perspective to see how the limbs are bending. But for today, we're gonna use the tillering tree, and my favorite method to see where we need to take off wood is to just grab any straight edge. It could be even a small block of wood, but I like to rub it on the belly of the bow, and you want your gap on the straight edge to be even all the way down the limb. This makes it easy to see where you need to take off wood. And wherever the gap is not even, I'll just take a pencil, mark it right there, and then I know I need to take off wood right where my pencil lines are. This is a sure way to make sure your limbs are bending evenly. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna use a scraper and a pencil, mark it, and then just take a little bit of wood off and continue doing that until we can put an actual string on it. The string we have on it right now is called a tillering string. If you want a proper tillering string, I've got these up for sale on the website. It's looped on one end and there's just a knot on the other end. It allows you to tie a bowyer's knot on this side at whatever distance you need so that you can use the same tillering string for every single bow you make. We're only gonna have the tillering string on it until we get the limbs bending about 6 inches only. Once it's bending about 6 inches, then we wanna put a real string on it as soon as possible. The limbs will bend a little differently once we move from a tillering string to a real string, so we wanna get to that real string as soon as possible. Pretty down-to-earth person, but I start to get giddy when I make bows. We're gonna string this up for the first time, full brace height, and this is always nerve-wracking. Come on. Yes! We've got a bow. So once you get a string on it, you've got a bow officially. That's gonna be about full brace height right there. Now I can, it's probably like 50 pounds at a 15-inch draw length. But once you get it to brace height, it moves so fast, so slow down with taking off the wood. Just slow way down. This is the time, if there's any time in this process, to take your time. Most people, when they make a bow for the first time, end up with a way lower draw weight than they actually wanted to end up with. To check if the limbs are even to each other, you can grab a tape measure and measure from the inside of the belly to the deepest point. You got 7 1/4 inches on that side. This one, 7 3/8. So we can tell this limb, which is the bottom limb, is bending more. You're gonna wanna get both limbs bending the same before you continue taking wood off on both limbs. Whenever I'm at this point in a bow build, I always move down just to a scraper. I have a little cabinet scraper here, and besides that, I'm going to just use sandpaper. Removing a little bit of wood will change the bend a lot. But something you need to watch out for, after you remove wood, wood has a memory, and this can be problematic for us bowyers because once we remove wood, it doesn't realize necessarily that that wood's removed immediately. So as bowyers, we do something that we call exercising the bow limbs. And you can do that by just drawing the bow and moving the limbs. And this is something you wanna do in between every single time you remove some wood, because you may remove wood in one spot, put it on your tilling tree, draw it down, and it doesn't show any correction. So you do it again, draw it down, no correction, and then all of a sudden you have a big hinge right there because the wood finally caught up. Then you have to try to catch it back up everywhere else, and you're just like bouncing back and forth. But if you exercise the limbs, you'll avoid that problem. It's a time-consuming process, but if you don't take the time to do it, you will regret it. You also want to keep in mind the positioning of your handle, because if I put the handle right in the middle, that's not like we're gonna draw it. So I'm gonna put the tillering tree right where my hand would go and then draw from there, and that's gonna make the tiller as realistic as possible. If we position the handle in the center where my hand's actually not gonna be, the limbs will bend a little differently, and we want it to bend the exact same way as it's gonna be when we're shooting the bow, so we can have, boom, really good high performance. When you're exercising the limbs, there's a point where you can feel it just like kind of hits a wall. Do not draw past that wall, because that's where it wants to break. 20 to 30 draws is normally sufficient to get the wood to forget the old memory and remember now the new memory, which is the most recent wood you took off the limb. Let's keep on tillering. The last little while of tillering will take a while, so I'll show you about 2 hours of work in about 20 seconds. I've got the tiller to where I like it. I think it's looking really good. Our next step is to shape the handle and our knocking points. Both of these are pretty much 100% personal preference. One thing to watch out for is if you decide to actually cut an arrow rest in, don't cut it in very far, and never cut it in past center when you're using a wood bow. One option is to just shoot it right off your hand. I like an arrow rest if I can put it in there, if I feel like I have enough wood. Since we added another piece of wood to make it thicker and this handle's not bending, we should be good to go ahead and cut a small arrow rest in. And then the knocking points, I tend to like to round my bottom knock over. On the top, I like to make it pointy. That just makes it really quick and easy to identify what's the top of the bow and what's the bottom of the bow. So I'm getting so excited because we're so close to shooting this bow. The last thing after that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint it and stain it. Again, personal preference for all of that from here on out, but it is definitely time to finish this up. I can't wait to see how it shoots and how fast it goes. So without further ado, let's do this. 158 feet per second. Now that kind of even impressed me. If you saw any of my hunting videos earlier this year, all of that was with 150 feet per second bow. 8 feet per second faster, off the shelf board bow. That's pretty crazy. I'm telling you, this fiberglass tape backing is like the biggest secret in bow making. And if you guys need a bowstring, head over to the website, pick one up. That's a good way to support me and this YouTube channel, as well as supporting you, giving you guys a very high quality bowstring. Go out, make a bow, have some fun, stay positive. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.